Well, it's January the 8th, 2022, and interesting day here. I guess next week will be the week of stress because I suppose the big push on the voting bill that the Democrats have come up with it will be kind of in play up to Martin Luther King Day on the 17th. So now apparently that's the psychological push they're doing, backed on one end, but January the 6th and Martin Luther King Day on the 17th, I guess, gives them their psychological move. On the other hand, as of the last report, Manchin hasn't changed his position. We haven't heard anything from Sinema, and so presumably she hasn't changed her position. And we don't know about the other 6 people who failed to override the parliamentarian over the issue of the $15 minimum wage. So there's potentially a cast of 8 people that might not be game to do this. So anyway, I thought I'd hit that, and then there's some other issues that I want to kind of raise too, which curious me. We're in a really strange world right now. I mean, we have teachers that won't teach, prosecutors that won't prosecute, Border Patrol agents and Homeland Security that's actually facilitating illegal immigration rather than blocking it. I mean, it kind of goes on and on and on like this, doesn't it? I mean, it's like things, we got a low unemployment rate, but people aren't working, and so it's really kind of a mess. So, at any rate, I guess we also have one of our key senators that made a faux pas on the use of the word terrorist about the riot at the Capitol on January the 6th, which got a lot of people spun up. So I want to address some of these issues and a few other things. Okay, if you like these videos, please subscribe, give me a like to help out with the algorithm particularly, because that helps with the algorithm. Any comments would be appreciated. Okay, well, so that's kind of the mess that we're in, as always. Yeah, I think that we'll have to see in the coming week, I guess, when the big push on this attempt to rig the voting system that the Democrats have, which I think is kind of interesting. They retreated all this January the 6th Memorial Day stuff a couple of days ago, which has really reached absurd levels of trying to compare it to Pearl Harbor or 9/11 and things of that sort, really strange. Because when you think about it, is that the whole thing, first of all, never could have really changed the outcome. I mean, the certified votes were already in record and the courts had already ruled. And I think that basically one way or the other, the outcome, which we all don't want, Biden being president, would have been declared somehow. And I've gone through that before about how the exact mechanism I think would have happened most likely. I don't believe there's any state legislature controlled by Republicans who is really going to rescind the actual certified vote and openly declare that an alternative slate of electors would be sent. I don't think any of them actually had the intestinal fortitude, let's say, to do that. I don't think so. And not saying, without taking any stance on whether you should or shouldn't do that, I'm just saying they wouldn't. It wasn't going to happen. I mean, our great Donald Trump had a bit of a pipe dream, I think, after the election occurred, because he'd been totally and he went to bed thinking he was winning and woke up and found out he was losing and went, what happened? Something must have gone wrong in the middle of the night, and well, the rest is history. But anyway, that's what it is. And on the other hand, I think the thing with Ted Cruz and his unfortunate choice of the word terrorist, I think riot would be a more appropriate term. Somebody really went after me on Twitter there, saying that wasn't right either. But yes, there was a riot, and it wasn't planned, and it was not consistent with what Trump's plans were either. That's the other thing. The Democrats are trying to maintain that Trump actually wanted this to occur the way it did, and he actually didn't. His actual plan, such as there was one, involved the people raising a bunch of election challenges and trying to get a commission put together that would review the charges of fraud. But again, given only 14 days before the person was going to be inaugurated, whoever it was going to be, the idea that a commission could be formed, could effectively review the vote and make any decision in 14 days is kind of out of the question. And failing to do so and failing to declare a winner would mean that Nancy Pelosi would be the next in line and would become president. not exactly what we want, is it? The lack of clear thinking in this whole thing is what really gets to me. I mean, purely just mapping out step by step what would happen in each scenario and seeing what the outcome would be. And the outcome was going to be what it was. And that's the problem, I think, with this whole idea. There was no way that the states were really going to all of a sudden decide to try to nullify the electoral count. And obviously, if a state had done that, let's just say that the Georgia legislature had done that, for instance, you know that the Democrats would immediately went to court and would reverse that decision. It would go to the Supreme Court. And given how they'd already ruled, I think they would have ruled the same way that the existing Secretary of State certification would stand. That's why I think that the whole idea was kind of a, but then the Democrats turn around and say, wow, this was this great threat to democracy. And it was a real chance that something like this was going to happen. And I just think that it really wasn't. And yet, Mitch McConnell and the Republicans have proposed some modest modifications to that election law they were using to make clear that the vice president doesn't have any latitude on what he does or doesn't count during that process. And of course, Chuck Schumer immediately shoots that idea down and says, no, we got to proceed with our own way to rig the election. And the fact is, of course, if they do succeed in rigging the election the way they want to, that'll create all the same public blowback that led to the January 6th protests and riot. Two separate things, by the way. The protest big, but where the president was speaking. Riot, a small group that was instigated by some unknown group of actors, part of whom may have been federal assets. We don't know that for sure, but there are some interesting people that were clearly very vocal during the process that weren't arrested, while other people who really didn't do anything more than walk through the area are arrested. So there's some real paradoxes there on what the government's doing on the investigation. And so, at any rate, that's kind of the way I see it. There was no chance that this was going to really change the outcome. And in fact, you could call it a stress test of the system, and the system held firm against a pretty determined challenge in a way. So I don't think the false fears that democracy is a threat is ridiculous. In fact, I've addressed that whole issue of those threats in a previous video, which I guess I could put a link to below if you haven't seen it already. Most of the people that are watching this probably have. But at any rate, that's just kind of my reaction to their overboard commemoration of January the 6th. And now the latest thing, they're trying to use I think a Section 3 of the 14th Amendment to try to say that Donald Trump and also a bunch of Republican legislators, House and Senate members, are eligible for running for office or serving in office, even though they're currently right now serving in office, which is kind of interesting for Donald Trump. But the others are in office because of something that they somehow were involved in a rebellion against the country. That's why they like to use the word insurrection all the time. But the fact of the matter, there was no insurrection. And I agree that the use of terrorism was a wrong word to use. There was a disturbance. I think it's kind of funny. The governor of Florida said it was just a Charlie Foxtrot, which I think is kind of funny. But at any rate, whatever. That might be a better description of it. Although the fact is, there were some instigators, and I don't know, since I know that a lot of these groups, these kind of fringe groups, are infiltrated by federal assets. I still kind of hold the viewpoint that the FBI informants could have instigated this to some degree, and this very suspicious fact that security was so lax is also there. Although it's also possible that since Republicans just never do things like this, nobody was really worried about it beyond the perfunctory token security. At any rate, one thing we're sure of is that the committee that Liz Cheney's on is not going to get to the bottom of it. So that's a pure propaganda front. And we look very much forward to her defeat in the upcoming primary in August of this year. So that would be a very nice thing to see her defeated in that primary. I'm not normally a big person that says, I don't like what this person said, go after him in a primary. I'm really not a big advocate of that in general. But in this case, I'm an advocate of it. I mean, I think somebody that was given a position of trust and I think kind of undeserved, really, because she hadn't really done the time and work to get there. Of being the conference chair of the Republican House, then turns around and absolutely betrays the party like this, I think, for no good reason, and to aid people that are really not in the interest of the country at all. It's one thing if there really was a real problem, but the problem is really with the Democrats, in my opinion, particularly once the Trump initiative was stopped. The threat to constitutional procedure is totally on the Democrat side, trying to rig the rules, rig the courts, and rig the election process to favor themselves. Although one has to wonder if they actually did this, whether they wouldn't be setting themselves up for a bigger defeat. Who says they're really going to win the election under those circumstances? Just because Republicans haven't emphasized certain procedures, if those procedures are made legal, they may jump on board and actually use them better than the other people do. And this idea of public funding might fund a bunch of marginal conservatives that otherwise don't have much support, but have messages that might resonate and might put them in office. So I tend to think that what the Democrats are doing is bad all the way around. And if nothing else, it'll make the country a lot less stable. That's the one thing that's for sure. As one group gets in and rigs the whole system in their favor and passes very unpopular laws only to be matched by the other side then winning the election and reversing all of it and going in the opposite direction. And so, to some degree, a stable path is probably better than an erratic path. Well, at any rate, that's kind of what I think about all this hullabaloo, and we'll look forward to the coming week to see what really happens and whether or not the people that are holding out against the Schumer and Biden and Pelosi push to rig things do, or whether they cave in, or whether they do something marginal. But at any rate, that's kind of it for now, and I will bring this video to a close. Again, the addresses of my social media sites are below. I've also joined Gettr. Although I post mainly on Twitter just because I'm usually reacting to things people are posting there, and I don't get much interaction on the other ones, sometimes on Gab and Parler and now Gettr. Until next time.